Hey everybody, Nick here. So I recently completed my first feature film, The Game of Life. I wrote and directed it. The film is in festival season and the first trailer is out now. Please check it out if you haven't already. Link is in the description. Today's video is part of a series about how we made this film, essentially with no budget, and how the way that we solve certain problems might relate to what you may be doing in your own work. The idea with this series is to crack down on the practical aspects of indie filmmaking that don't usually get a lot of press. Things like how we got a score for the film. You might not know this, but all those online music services that give you, free, unlimited use of all the music in the world, they specifically exclude usage for feature films. They make you negotiate separately for those. All those lifetime subscriptions are invalid once you say you're making a movie. So what can you do instead? Well, I'll have the answer for that in a future video. There are just hurdles involved with feature films that most people aren't aware of. So this series will talk about budgeting money, budgeting time, dealing with a whole variety of personnel, tackling things like score and Foley, the critical role of software and what to look for and lock in on, how to shoot on location and what legal hurdles you might need to consider there, and of course a deep dive on equipment from cameras to lighting and more. Today's video is going to be specifically about color. And I'm not talking about color grading, which is the processing of your footage into a final look, but rather a step a bit earlier in the process about how to plan for what the role of color will be in your project and what it will convey in your story. There are lots of great examples throughout film history about using color as a storytelling tool. Sometimes it's done in more subtle ways, like in The Matrix, where the green-tinted shots convey the artificial look of the computer world, and blue-tinted shots tell us we're in the real world. Sometimes it's much more obvious, like in Schindler's List, where the black and white starkness of wartime Germany was interrupted to heartbreaking effect by the little girl's striking red coat. My film is called The Game of Life, and it has several distinct sections corresponding to the film's main locations. The movie opens with a prologue of about 10 minutes, all of which takes place in Jack's apartment, where he lives with his girlfriend Ellen. After that, there's a psychiatric hospital, which is the next 45 minutes or so. Then the characters escape to Las Vegas for another half hour or so, and then finally there's a very brief epilogue. The film is 94 minutes in total and broken down into those 4 sections: prologue, hospital, Vegas, epilogue. Not strictly a 3-act structure, but organized nevertheless. As I was planning the production of the movie, I realized I wanted each section to be easily recognizable just by color, and it worked out that each location lended itself well to a coherent visual theme in exactly that way. And although the story is a very personal and intimate one, it's also a bit odd and dressed up in just a little bit of science fiction clothing, so I figured we could lean into color motifs as a way to tie in with the somewhat fantastic nature of the story. So, here's what we did. Part 1, the apartment is our base state. It's like we're living down on Earth. So the colors we chose were greens, browns, and yellows. As we look through frames from the prologue, we can see everything is really tied together that way. Everything was chosen to keep this theme. From the set decoration, the wooden dresser, the yellowish art on the wall, Jack's green shirt, the warm tungsten-colored lighting, it all sort of heads toward the lower left quadrant of the vector scope. But this is also a good moment to mention that you can decide how specific you want to be here. So the wall art has some blue in it. Is that okay? Do we want to either pick different art or grade those blues out, make the frame strictly composed of our chosen colors? For our film, we decided it was okay to have a bit of intrusion on our color theme. We weren't trying to be too in-your-face about these decisions. What you're looking at here is final graded frames from the film. But a different director may have made a different choice. Remember, this is art, and it's up to you. Don't let anyone tell you there's a right way or a wrong way to make these decisions. There are rules, guidelines, templates, best practices, but every single one of those things is up to you to learn, sift through, and select for yourself. There's no one right path. Okay, next up, part 2, the psychiatric hospital. I wanted this to feel really clean, sterile, Spartan, neutral. It's like we've left the earth of our apartment and ascended into the heavens. So our primary colors are blues, whites, and grays. Jack's shirt is a dark blue. The nurses wear blue scrubs. The lunch trays are blue. The cups are blue. The flatware is blue. We found bedding that was just the right shade of blue I wanted. We went through like 8 different blankets trying to find just the exact hue that I wanted. At one point, I was getting frustrated and figured I'd just get something close and then tweak it in post, but we finally found something that was really more or less exactly what I was after. It's a nice, rich, royal blue. It's a lot like the color of the nurse scrubs. And I don't know, something about it just felt right to me. If we look at this shot from the trailer, Jack wakes with a start, and that's our first shot in the psych ward. And I love what we have here. This is almost precisely what I had storyboarded. It's like being up in the sky, almost as if Jack is literally laying on top of a cloud. The color theme is meant to be really clear, even if it's not strictly enforced. The idea is that you can just look at one frame of this film and know exactly where you are just by the color. We did quite a bit of set design here. This is the longest stretch of the film, and we wanted it to be specific, even if it is intentionally a little bit bland. So things like picking that bed sheet so specifically, the gray on the walls. It's just wallpaper, but it's meant to evoke kind of a concrete feeling, almost like a jail, but as pleasant as its jailers could make it. I was trying to communicate 2 things at once, both the kindness of these types of healthcare professionals in the real world, but also Jack, the patient, his feeling of being trapped while in their care and really hating the experience. So the color theme was a way to do that. One wrinkle here is what happens if we go to a nighttime setting. Or in the case of this film, we have both night settings, but also a meditation scene, which is during the day, but in a darkened room. I tried really hard to stick to the color theme, but again, without making it so obvious or so strict. So the night scenes are pretty straightforward. Night scenes already tend to skew blue, and just the right lighting here is going to evoke the mood we're looking for. So these night scenes and the dark meditation scene, we filmed those all during the day, but we blacked out our set to eliminate all the ambient light, and then we just used fixtures to achieve the look. For the bedroom night interiors, we used 3 tube fixtures. So the 2 beds in the bedroom are up against the wall that has a large window on it. And so we kind of framed that window with the tubes, one on the left, one on the right, and one above. I set them to slightly different color temperatures to get just a bit of variety depending on which character we were looking at. We did some overs and we did some overheads, but I think it was something like 7,000 degrees on one of them, 9,000 degrees on the other, something like that. Just a little bit of mix of a variety of high temperatures, which produces a very cool light. Side note here, for some of you who get confused about this, you're not alone. It's odd because if you adjust color temperature sliders in your computer or on your camera upwards towards the higher temperatures, you'll notice that your image gets warmer. But then you'll hear cinematographers talking about a warm light for a scene, and they're turning down the color temperature of their fixture to achieve this. So what's up with that? Who's wrong here? How can those both be true? Well, they are both true. And I'll try and explain this so that you can understand it in hopefully a simple way. Let's call 5,000 degrees our neutral color temperature. That's close to the surface temperature of the sun and also the sun's color temperature. When we set the white balance of our camera, we're telling it what the color temperature of our light source is so that the camera can interpret the sensor data accordingly and assign color values in the red, green, blue color space, or whatever our final color space is, that looks like what our eyes expect. A candle burns cooler at about 2,000 degrees. And if we tell the camera that our scene is at 5,000 degrees, but then we light with candles, everything will look very yellow-orange. We call those warmer tones. We have to lower our camera temperature down to 2,000 degrees, which brings back the blues. So we're increasing the blues, or you might say cooling down the image as we lower that color temperature. And so works in reverse for higher temperatures. So if that's all confusing, in short, lighting goes from yellowish to bluish as you go from cooler temperatures to warmer temperatures. But your camera settings will go from blue to yellow as you go from cooler temperatures to warmer temperatures, because it's trying to counteract the behavior of the light source and present you with neutral colors. So one way to have a cooler image is just tell your camera that you're using lights of a lower temperature than they actually are. Drop the white balance value. One way to have a warmer image is to tell your camera that your lights are higher temperatures than they actually are. Increase the white balance value. But if your white balance matches the temperature of your light fixtures, then you get an image which more or less represents colors as our eyes expect to see them during the day. In short, you do not need to nail your white balance to get the image right, as many YouTubers like to say. What you want to do is use the white balance which is correct for your creative intent. Now, for what it's worth, I set a rule for myself a long time ago that I just shoot everything at 5,000 Kelvin, regardless of camera, regardless of codec. I get my final colors with grading. And yes, you absolutely can correct a whole ton of color shift out using that method, even with XFABC footage. You know, maybe that's not the best technique if you're dealing with 8-bit 1080p GoPro footage, but I don't use that kind of footage in my work. And anyway, you're gonna have other problems with that kind of stuff. As long as you have at least 10-bit color, you have plenty of room to move around quite a lot. Good colorists will tell you the same thing. Not that I am one, but I try to steal and borrow techniques from those guys. And ever since I did that, color grading got a whole lot easier for me. I just stay at 5,000 and I adjust from there. So, sorry for the long aside there. All that said, our lights, again, for these night scenes were between 7,000 and 9,000 degrees. But like I just said, I set the camera at 5,000 degrees. And so we get a very lovely blue night temperature, which falls right in line with our color theme for the hospital, as well as what our eyes sort of expect to see at night. Your eyes evolved to recognize things at about 5,000 degrees. So when you have higher color temperature lights, they just seem bluer to you. You know, in the failing light of the evening, after the sun has set below the horizon, everything looks a little bit bluer to our eyes just because of how they work. Our eyes expect that 5,000 Kelvin, or really 5,600, whatever, from the sun. But when we get a higher temperature, it just looks bluer to us. Anyway, okay. Light temperature rant over. In the middle of the film, we leave the hospital and go to Las Vegas. So if the prologue was Earth and the hospital was the sky, what's next? Well, Las Vegas is called Sin City, so we're going to hell. Our colors for Las Vegas are reds, blacks, and golds. That seemed to be a really good fit, but maybe a little harder to achieve. The challenge in particular was making sure that the golds for Las Vegas weren't just the same yellows from the apartment, and to make sure that the reds don't interfere too much with skin tones, since skin tones are also essentially red. So we chose just to go for little pops of color here and there. Jack's tie is red. We got some little red throw pillows for the hotel suite. Sometimes we just flooded everything with red, like the red backdrops and red lights at the nightclub that they go to. And we had this practical lighting prop, the skeleton key, which provided a really nice light to punch up a bit when we needed it. But again, some things don't wind up lining up exactly as you expect. So for example, I made this massive mural for the hotel suite scenes. It's like planets and galaxies. It was all painted with reds, blacks, and golds. And in real life, you can really see that. But on screen, you just don't. It's very, very subtle on camera, and much more so than I had expected. But I also rigged that mural with a bunch of twinkling lights. And those really did look great, providing some sparkle, which was nice and somewhat unique. And every once in a while, one of those lights would cause a flare on our Apollo anamorphic lenses, which was great, just a really cool little gift. There are some Easter eggs throughout the set design, both corresponding to the color schemes as well as the larger themes of the movie. I won't point them out just yet, but maybe after the film's been released, I'll go back through and talk about some of those things. One thing I will tell you is that that entire mural was reused production material from the hospital sets. The walls of the hospital were made out of lumber and asphalt board. We took them apart completely, recut, repainted, installed the lights, and that exact same material is now the mural on the hotel suite walls. It was both economical, but thematically very satisfying for reasons that might become clear to you when you see the full movie. If I were to do this again, I would definitely be more careful in a couple of spots, particularly the bar scenes. I let the fixtures do a little more in terms of color, going through some greens and blues. And if I did it again, I would just keep them a little more strictly on the color theme. It still looks great, but it's one thing that I would change, or maybe just think about differently. This section of the film was shot mostly on the Zelmus Apollo anamorphic lenses, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, provide some really lovely lens flares. And those flares are going to be heavily biased blue because they're based on the blue lens coatings of those lenses. You can get different color flares, but you really have to work for it. So for example, if we have a shot of the skeleton key and we set the light to be just red, it will cause a small red lens flare in the Apollos. But the moment we allow that prop to show anything outside of either a pure red or a pure green light color, the flares will skew very heavily blue. This is obviously outside of our strict color theme, but because it's an anamorphic lens flare, evocative of many of my favorite films and a significant part of cinematic film history, I 100% give it a pass. This could be a black and white film and I would be okay with a blue lens flare. That's just me though. Many folks love to make fun of lens flares and say films like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek are just a huge overuse of them. That's almost like collective agreed upon knowledge at this point, but it's something that I completely disagree with. I personally love the cinematography of the Kelvin Universe Star Trek movies, especially the first one from 2009. Just gorgeous. I just watched it again a few days ago with my kids and I was just like, oh my God, this movie is beautiful. A blue lens flare with diagonal line pairs and flattened elliptical orbs, just sign me up, okay? All right, so we've gone through everything else, the prologue, the hospital, Las Vegas, and then we get to the epilogue. So Jack has been through this whole journey starting on Earth, going up into the heavens, falling down into the inferno. What's left? Well, many good stories end with some kind of a synthesis, and that's what we attempted to do with our story. But how can we represent that with color? How do we combine the reds, greens, blues, yellows, golds, whites, blacks? Well, with a rainbow, of course, right? The film's final moments have several rainbows in frame, at first caused by lights and lens flare elements, and then with some careful set decoration. This portion of the movie is the shortest of all the sections I described, lasting just a few minutes. You know, as you look at these frames, hopefully you can see that color theme is still deliberate. And I hope it's effective, even if it's completely subconscious and no viewer would ever notice it. But taking a step back here, you might have noticed that I did not once say the words teal or orange, despite the popularity of that concept and the bazillions of videos on why and how to achieve a teal and orange look. My point is that you do not have to follow any particular color schema to make a great looking film. If your question is which colors are more cinematic, that's silly. A movie can be fantastic with any colors you like or no color at all, so long as it works with the story. It's true that things like skin will usually read best when they fall on the skin tone line, but even that rule is only true for scenes meant to be shot in a neutral daytime setting. For night scenes, your skins will be so blue they won't be anywhere near the skin tone line. If you're in an interior nightclub with heavily saturated lights, you could end up literally anywhere on the color wheel. It's not about following a rule or a trend about which color is cinematic. It's about whether you can tell a coherent story with whatever colors you do choose. Anyway, that's how I decided to tell this particular story. And like most of the aspects of the Game of Life, these ideas are completely stolen from other movies that I love and admire, and I can only hope I've done, just a little bit to follow in the footsteps of the greats. But tell me, what do you think about the color choices in the film as I've just shown them and described them to you here? How do you like the color schemes we chose? Would you do it differently? Does this give you any ideas for your own projects? And is there anything here I didn't discuss about this particular topic that you'd like to know? I dipped a little bit into lighting, but barely covered that topic, and that's something in particular that I'll definitely cover in a future video. So if that is your particular area of inquiry, let me know in the comments, exactly what you'd like to know about that. Otherwise, let me know whatever else you're thinking about in the comments. I do read and reply to these, and stay tuned. There's a lot more in this series that I think will be interesting, if not practical and useful for your own work. Thank you so much for watching. Be bold, be scrappy, shoot something great. See you next time.